As the first panel has impressively illustrated, and all of you certainly have observed, the Italian election in spring of 2018 has led to an escalation of the humanitarian crisis in the central Mediterranean. Xenophobic policies that had already been introduced long time or several years ago had become visible in their most dramatic consequence. The option to rather let people drown and die rather than sending or even allowing ships to rescue them was no longer an implicit outcome, but the explicit consensus and the official line of some of Europe's biggest countries. One key factor to execute this total shutdown of European southern borders is the blockade of the search and rescue NGOs that were active in the central Mediterranean. This has led to an immediate and steep increase of casualties in the Central Med over the course of this summer. This evening's second panel will focus on how the SAR NGOs can continue their work and can continue to put political pressure on European parliamentarians, lawmakers and politicians under these deteriorated and dramatically changed consequences. The panel consists of the following guests. To my left, it's Karl Kopp. Karl Kopp is a representative of Pro Asyl of Germany and the board of the European Council of Refugees, ECHE. To my right is Violeta Morena-Lax. She's a lawyer. Now I'm supposed to present her CV, which is utterly impossible because it is so long, so you can probably imagine her as a little Stephen Hawking of European migration and migrant law. And to my far right is Giorgia Linardi. Giorgia Linardi. She's a senior advocacy of Sea-Watch in Italy. The discussion is going to try to sum up how the sea and rescue NGOs can deal with the situation that the Salvini government has created in the last months, and how solidarity can continue to work even under the conditions of this total political blockade. Probably the next step of this development is going to be the 20th of September, the European Summit on Migration organized by Austria, the head of the European Council in these months. Today I came here with Austrian Airlines, and it was a double-sided article on how the Austrian Council presidency is envisioning its work, and the title was A Europe That Protects. But of course, even already in the first paragraph of the article, it was totally made clear that it was not a Europe that protects the refugees, but a Europe that protects the citizens from the refugees. So, Karl Kopp, what can we expect from this summit in the next week?
With this introduction, nothing. It's an informal summit. Nice pictures from Salzburg, dishes, I don't know, Beethoven houses, group photos. Migration Day discussed during dinner. That's all. So, what we can expect from Austria is also nothing concerning refugee protection and defending civil rights and human rights. Austria is a similar situation, it's the same country, but a similar situation than in Italy. 60%, let's say, populist votes. One right-wing and fascist coalition party in Italy, the same. The Austrian is not so successful like Salvini, but they advocate in Europe, they want something like the Austrian solution, the Australian solution, open return centers, or whatever they call it. So that means the midterm vision of Austria is to destroy the right to seek asylum in Europe. So to shift everything to, I don't know, the middle of nowhere, and then to resettle, let's say, 3-4 Christian women. That's, in a nutshell, the concept of Austria at the moment. So as a EU proposal, and I think even the European Commission said this is not in line with EU law, so they still hope in Europe. So I don't expect anything concerning this summit. It's a media summit, so Kurz will stress his vision, Merkel will tell us again how successful was the Turkey deal, and that she wants to create something similar in Libya, and how important is the Niger approach to create a labor, there. So this kind of talks, and the Commission will stress in English, hopefully, the control centers, the German translation, you cannot use an abbreviation because so even my English colleagues are shocked. So they will sell their concept, and it's crystal clear that all follow now the right-wing populist agenda. The Commission wants to fight populism and right-wing populism and make proposals to copy and paste exactly that even the German alternative for Germany is the right translation, are very happy with the new proposals of the Commission they offered yesterday. And the European trend is let them die, ship, externalize, outsource, not refugee protection, outsource border policing, and in Europe you get camps, detention, camps, and to create new procedures. We have the blueprint, the hotspots in Greece. Now we get these control centers. They make a proposal that every person could be detained for 3 months. So this kind of procedure to give Frontex more power, we already discussed this. So this is now the European debate since years, and the only positive aspect we had was yesterday. The red card for Hungary in the European Parliament. But okay, we will not have many of these lovely days because nearly all of them need a kind of red card, but this is the political situation.
Austria has been a constant source of proposals to reduce or restrict refugee rights, but the proposal to actually not allow any asylum applications on European territory anymore is probably one of the most radical things they came up with. Is this actually going to be on the agenda next week?
No. In Salzburg, maybe fringe meetings, the right-wing Minister of Interior, Kickel, would maybe stress this is the best proposal. No asylum is always the best proposal. But officially they will discuss what is in the pipeline. And the Austrian, before the Bulgarian and later the Romanian were not really greedy to create a common asylum system. Nobody wants a common European asylum system. But they focus on deterrence, border, Frontex, externalization. They are not so powerful. They talk. The guy is more talkative, more the marketing right-wing approach. At the moment, concerning the so-called disembarkment crisis, let them die, they are part of. They are facilitator in Brussels or in meetings, but because they are part of the EU presidency, but most of the little bit more willing, let's say, it's quite unclear who is willing at the moment in Europe. Portugal, yes, 12 points, but the rest is not really willing concerning to make a good proposal to solve this one crisis in the Mediterranean. They are sidelined, so they don't play a role. So there are meetings, they are present, but the German, France, Spain, and others talk about little coalitions concerning this disembarkment proposal or these controlled centers. But it's totally unclear what will be the outcome. And they will discuss it also maybe in fringe meetings in Salzburg and later and later and later. But it's crystal clear they will not find a solution concerning the common European asylum system. All the proposals on the table are totally dangerous. It's better that they don't agree on this. Dublin 4 and so on, asylum procedure regulation is horrible. It's also a kind of outsourcing program, but they stick together to find solutions concerning deals with third countries. And it's all about, we talk about law, rule of law, right to live, human rights, refugee rights. They talk about deal. Everything is a deal. The deal is in contradiction to the rule of law. Because the Erdogan deal, the bloodiest is the Libyan deal, there is no law. It's not about law. It's about getting rid of people at any cost. That's, let's say, the common European approach at the moment.
But the notion to have centers or regional embarkation facilities in North Africa has been there for about 15 years now, but in the last months they were particularly stressing that now they really want to get the deals with North African countries, but so far no African country has shown any ability or any kind of will to accept such a center on their territory. Are they going to come up with something new to convince them now?
It's a hell of money in the pipeline. So I don't know what is, maybe money and different other privileges would be an incentive to say yes. But at the moment, the key partners are in, you know, in better, in Maghreb, in Egypt. They like to be in cooperation and get something, and they will not be criticized for human rights violation and keep the story cool, but nobody wants a huge camp on his territory. This sounds really like colonialism, and therefore I don't think that they get a candidate at the moment. And but they get other gatekeepers like Morocco in another design. And concerning the control centers in Europe, it's similar. Everybody says that's a good idea. Every closed camp is a good idea. But nobody really said, I want also these controlled centers, but it doesn't matter whether you call them hotspot or controlled centers or in German, Paketsentrum and transit procedure. So we have millions of labels, but the result is at the end always a camp. Something more or less close. I don't want to compare the Libyan torture and camps with the other camps, but camp is more than a facility. It's an idea how to treat human beings as objects and to treat them without dignity and to deport them and control them and expose them and so on.
You said that there's going to be no hope that they will finally agree on a new Dublin regulation. The reason that there is no Dublin regulation development is one of the factors why Italy has been closing its ports in the last weeks and months. What's going to happen if they can't agree on any kind of distribution framework?
Yeah, it's all about relocation, distribution. But okay, concerning the Italian case, so the crisis in the Mediterranean started earlier. It's not Salvini only. Salvini is really Trump-style bust. Yeah? So, and he played the same blackmailing game, but it started earlier. And there is no justification. There is no justification to let hundreds of people die and talk about Dublin. Yeah, there is no justification. The same Salvini, I heard, we don't have the contract, made a deal with Seehofer, our Salvini, the Lega Bavaria, Minister of Interior, and the deal is like this: we are allowed to send people back from the Bavarian-Austrian border. I sent one back, and then I received one rescued migrant or refugee from Italy. So it's a deal. It's all about deals, like the Turkey deal. We send people back to Turkey, and then Europe will resettle one Syrian. This kind of deal making. And it seems like Seehofer finds a similar Dublin deal. It's not about Dublin at all, but one part of this border procedure. It will not work, but it's everything. The deals play also a deterrence role and a show. Yeah, we are the toughest. We don't need the original. We don't need the right wing. We are able to cope with this in the same manner. And the Dublin story is not over, but there is no solution. It's crystal clear. Europe is split. There will not be a mandatory allocation system. So the whole package concerning common European asylum system is blocked because of this. And in this case, it's better that it's blocked, to be honest, because it's not wise to make reforms in a climate like this concerning asylum and so on. You will not get what you deserve. And so this is blocked, but the frontage proposal, they will decide on this frontage proposal, high security. There is no problem. There is no problem. All will agree on this. Concerning the proposal
needs to increase the number of officials.
Yeah, it's not only it's a mandate to act together with third countries if they allow them to enter. It's about increasing capacity concerning deportation. It's more power in the field of these controlled centers and hotspots and so on. So there is, in this package, there are many little details about detention, 3 months. This is, I think, in the return directive proposal. And the package is really dangerous, and I think there is a real risk that they speed it up. Say yes before the European election to show strength, security orientated. And AGEAS or Common European Asylum System, they have a package, it's 5 dossiers, they have already a kind of found a compromise, but the crucial package is still open. This is Dublin and Asylum Procedure Regulation proposal.
Thank you, Karl. Kopp. Giorgia, when Sea-Watch bought their first ship in Germany, they made a press conference and they said, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to rescue, we're going to monitor, and we're going to campaign. Now, you gave me a list of all the search and rescue efforts by the NGO in the Mediterranean. It's 8 ships and one airplane. All are blocked by one or the other way. What's left to do for the NGOs now?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I would like to underline the fact that as Sea-Watch we started to be an element of pressure in the central Mediterranean, and we never wanted to substitute ourselves to the authorities and to the institutions that should be since years in the central Mediterranean to rescue people. And we started from the idea of few German citizens that were not really convinced about the information they were getting regarding what was happening in the central Mediterranean. So they decided to go themselves frontline to see what was happening. And this resulted in uncomfortable action. But before that, we actually cooperated for over 2 years with the Italian Coast Guard that considered the NGOs their own fleet. And before the message of the Italian Coast Guard changed, because they were mandated by the European Union to train the Libyan Coast Guard, I remember clearly that the big ask of the Italian Coast Guard was, please give us a European mission with a clear search and rescue mandate. The NGOs ended up becoming the Italian Coast Guard's fleet, and this reached its peak in 2016. We even had meetings where only NGOs and Italian Coast Guard were participating, and they were called Una Bis, from the Latin one force. Sorry to deviate slightly from the question, but I think it's important to give a little bit of background. And I think one of the main problems and one of the main reasons behind the situation we're finding ourselves in today is that we're too short of memory with regards to what happens. We tend to forget too quickly. So after 2016, I remember 19 December 2016, first accusation of NGOs being colluded with smugglers. And since then, it's been an increasing attack. It has been just the start of a huge denigration campaign that was played at media level, at political level, at judicial level, to try to prove that NGOs were colluded with smugglers, that our funding came from not clear sources, and that we had an interest in bringing migrants into Italy. To make it very clear, Sea-Watch, together with all the other smaller NGOs that were born to rescue people at sea, never had an interest and the intention to disembark. It was actually the Italian Coast Guard that was telling us, hey guys, since we have no assets with a clear search and rescue capacity, we have difficulties coordinating with the Navy assets because we don't know where they are and they don't have a search and rescue mandate. Please get bigger ship so that you're able to do the whole rescue operation, because legally a rescue operation is ended when people are disembarked in a safe port. And here I would like to ask, what does it mean that now the Libyan Coast Guard has the mandate of search and rescue activities if the definition of rescue is that it ends in a safe place? After a huge campaign of criminalization of our activities, our operational space has become indeed smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point that I'm not even that jealous of my colleagues from Aquarius that are about to start a mission and don't even know where they're going to bring the people, if they're going to be able to actually operate, and if this does not result in even further suffering to the people, because we then have them on board for days and weeks. That's obviously better than dying. But when I was in Catania Harbor looking for 5 days at the people stuck on Diciotti, and I saw the ones that were decided to be unaccompanied minors. Amongst these, when MSF reported, I remember a guy, 17 years old, 30 kilos, he could not really see well because he was held in a prison for 1 year in the dark. I was really wondering what we were doing if we were not killing them the second time. If that was so, how could it be possible that that's the welcome that Europe gives to these people? Right now, indeed, we don't even know if we're going to be able to be back at sea. We're not giving up. We are looking as Sea-Watch into new options. We cannot disclose too many details because we would like to inform you about what we're going to do once that's going to happen and it's decided. So sorry about that. But for sure, we have 3 options. We can go back to a monitoring role, and that's a bit what was described by my friend and colleague Riccardo Gatti. So they're going to use Austral in the Central Mediterranean, going back to a monitoring mission, as we started as Sea-Watch with an 18 meters fishing vessel from 1917, with no really rescue capacity. But then, how long will that be allowed? We don't know. And are we going to end up witnessing pullbacks and not being able to even to rescue people? Rescuers that are perfectly trained to actually do so and even have assets to do so. And it's also quite difficult to step back from a level of expertise that we have reached in the past years. On the other hand, we can insist on search and rescue operations, and that's what we will do, at least as Sea-Watch, until we can, to try and find ways to sneak around this monster of a system that is keeping us chained in port. And for sure, what we have, and is still in our hands, is to raise awareness, to share our experience, to share what we have heard from the people we have rescued, and to work more on campaigning. For that, we need more engagement with civil society, and we need more engagement at political level. We need that to happen not just in single countries, but across borders. I came here late, from Italy, and I need your help, because right now it is not possible to counter what is happening in my country without the support of other countries and the people that in those countries that are facing similar difficulties and a similar moment have a sensitivity towards what's happening. So I would really encourage also at political level to really push for building more leverage also between national MPs across borders. And then it's also responsibility for civil society and activists. We are civil society at sea. We are European citizens or worldwide citizens. We even have an Australian and a Korean captain, who cares? We are civil society at sea. We are you at sea. Now we are not at sea anymore, because it is not allowed to civil society to know the truth about what happens in the Mediterranean anymore. So we have just gone back in 2 months, 3 months, at a situation that we had right after 2011 and before Mare Nostrum. I'm going to keep it short for the next one. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. But still, let's stay for a moment on the possibilities of campaigning. In the days and weeks after it became clear that Italy was really going to go serious, close the ports, block the ships, there was a wave of political support from the side of the civil society. The Seebrücken demonstrations in Germany got a lot of support and a lot of people on the street. There was a period, I don't know, 1 year, 1.5 years ago, when many of the activists from the Saar NGOs said, no, the public is not so interested in our work anymore, we don't know what to do to make the media interested again, and now all came back and 10,000 of people went to the street. Do you have any strategies to try to extend this kind of political support that you're getting, maybe also to other European countries?
So this is actually being reflected into the structure of Sea-Watch itself, that will, until I would say just a few months ago, was basically only based in Germany, as for people that have a specific role in raising awareness. Now we have a team in the Netherlands, we have a team in Italy, we have a team in Malta. So we started by having our own people in different countries to try and understand what's the different perception of the work we do in other countries and how we can reach out to the people in those countries in the best way. This is not an easy task. And I have also to say we're now also asked to go a bit out of our comfort zone. We have endeavored so much in become technically fit for search and rescue, and we have put so much effort into that. And trust me, it's not easy, because you have to learn how to do mass rescue operations without any real procedure or precedent being there. And now we find ourselves being the only, as NGOs in general, the only free and independent witness of what's going on in one of the more contested areas in the world. So first step for sure is having our own people in various countries to understand how we can better operate. We are working on interlinking initiatives, but for that we need indeed more support and more engagement from civil society. I'll give you an example. After the Zeebrugge demonstration that I think gathered 15,000 people, 13 even more. Okay, we had a similar demonstration in Italy, where we had activists chaining themselves in front of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport in charge for the Italian Coast Guard. And we had some activists coming from Germany, but obviously that was 15, I don't know, what was the number of the Zeebrugge?
It was a lot of demos, it wasn't just one, it was a series of demos, altogether several 10,000.
So we had one, it was around mid-July, the one I mean. 7th of July.
How much?
I think it was 15,000, 10,000. Anyways, in Italy we were 50 people.
50?
Yeah, so we need, and this is a sad example, but it really shows how we are just at the beginning of the process of making this movement more transnational, and we cannot do this alone. So we are, my colleagues here in Germany are very much engaged in reaching out, in making a lot of events, and in order to raise awareness about the situation, about what we're doing, but also in a pop, let's say, way to try and involve more people. We know that we need double, triple effort in Italy to reach the same number of people, because it's just a different way the country engages with these aspects, and it's a country that sees the consequences of what's happening every day with its own eyes, and it sees this because it was purposely made because of a clear strategy from the government side to make sure that the streets would be full of people that have no housing, no place where to go, so that the citizens would see it and would feel uncomfortable, because no one likes to see misery all around every day, and they would start indeed thinking that we are invaded, and that what's the point of saving these people if then that's what happens to them in our country. And we had also a similar, I heard, and this is right, I mean, what's the point? Does it make sense to really push and ask for enough search and rescue capacity when then we're not able to welcome these people? Well, it's not that we're not able, it's that we don't want to. So the problem is that I see that we keep discussing matters that pertain to land at sea. Redistribution and doubling is not something you discuss at sea. At sea, you rescue people, you bring them to a safe place. End of the story, immediately. So I think it is on land now. The battles, I'm calling it that's not really nice, but you know what I mean, the struggle. At sea, if we are allowed, we can continue operating. We need more support, because NGOs were never enough. We need more support, but we can't keep doing that. We need more support in that, but right now it's on land that something needs to be. At sea we know what to do and we know how to do it, and we just need more people to do it with us. On land we need a structural change. And this is something that it cannot be done by Open Arms, cannot be done by SOS Méditerranée, MSF, Sea-Watch. We're not policy makers. We can raise awareness, we can share our experience, we can bring the voice of the people that we rescue. But then it's up to us together with you, at political level, at civil society level, to push this. At national level, at supranational level, we do engage with MPs, with MEPs, but as a matter of fact, for example, I would really like to pressure Social Democrats to try and have a chat with their colleague, Mr. Prime Minister Giuseppe Muscat, who's keeping our vessels since more than 70 days chained. And according to the flag state, our vessel actually exceeds the requirements of a vessel that can do search and rescue search and rescue activities. And anyways, it doesn't even matter because we are registered as a pleasure craft and there is no law that prohibits the use of our vessel for search and rescue activities. I would also like to understand how come that NGOs' vessels are subject to so much in-depth inspections, and this is not the case for the assets that we are providing to the Libyan Coast Guards, that have no life jackets, that have no medical personnel on board. And these assets, I know them very well because they belong to my police, the Guardia di Finanza in Italy. They are not search and rescue assets, and that's in the best case scenario. It's actually the asset that we saw in the video shown in the Mare Clausum report by Charles. And now, last month, a decree has passed in the Italian Parliament and Senate to donate another 12 assets to the Libyan Coast Guard to increase their search and rescue capacity. Well, these assets are composed by 2 other Guardia di Finanza vessels, the same one that we saw engaging in the 6th of November operation, absolutely not suitable for search and rescue activities, and 10 units class 500 from the Italian Coast Guard. They are 10 meters long. I talked to a friend from the Italian Coast Guard without mentioning the decree or anything, and I just asked him, hey, how do you use these assets? What do you use these assets for? And he told me, patrolling very close to the coast, because they're pretty fast. Okay, how much crew? 3 people. And boarding capacity? No. What about rescuing? And he told me, better pedalo. I don't know how to translate it. The thing you take you know, when you go at the seaside and you just want to have around and kind of, yeah. And I make sure not to give any background, okay, of my questions. And this comes from a member of the Italian Coast Guard. So these are the assets that we are providing the Libyan Coast Guards with. And meanwhile, our vessels are blocked in Malta. And Sea-Watch vessel is blocked in Malta, even properly registered. We had multiple inspections from the Maltese authority, from the Dutch authority, our flag state, all with positive results. As of today, there is no one piece of paper, no formal act that justifies our detention. And this actually is the case for the closure of ports, for the denial of access to port to aquariums or to open arms in Malta, but as well in Italy, where I remember my colleagues from Open Arms were once accused to represent a threat to security, and our Ministry of Transport recalled an article from the Code of Navigation that had something to do with pollution. So this is the situation where we're at. We would really like you to pressure for politics to go back, be done in at least at communication level, through the proper channels, because it is not. I can't believe that today we're blocked because of press releases and tweets and Facebook posts. And this is the case for everything that has been happening since Salvini is in power in Italy. Minniti has done actually a better job, more subtle. And now the actual blockade has been done all through social media. That's why we're blocked today.
Thank you, Giorgia. Violeta, the attacks on the SAR NGOs are political, but the instrument is not only social media, but it's also the law that is being used against them. And how far could the law also be a weapon to defend themselves?
So thanks a lot for the question. I mean, I have a couple of, I have a list. I have several lists that I wanted to share with you regarding like the different things that have been happening this past year that could make the object of a legal remedy. So, for example, wrongful prosecution, a la Capanamur. You have seen that for several of the different NGOs. Detention of assets and the withdrawal of flag that happened to the aquariums. For example, now they're flying the Panama flag. Registration issues, that's something that has been contested both in relation to Sea-Watch, but also in relation to the Lifeline, and the result has been a host of administrative burden and issues that have led to the detention of the assets de facto, because as Giorgia was saying, there is no legal regulation that has been passed, because they will be unconstitutional. I mean, they will be illegal. It will be illegal to do many of the things that have been happening on the ground. So that's why they hide behind social media, Twitter, and all the rest, because actually it will be illegal to close ports, it will be illegal to discriminate against particular owners of particular types of vessels. The law of the sea requires the principle of non-discrimination. That's really black and white. And so a particular attack that targets civil society organizations that are performing rescue, it's absolutely against any sort of legal regime that Itamar presented to us before. The detention of crews, that's sort of like a new development. We didn't see that very often in the past, but there are now at least 2 cases that I'm aware of a 24-year-old Irish graduate who went to Lesbos to do some volunteer work, and now he's been for 2 months in jail. Somebody else mentioned the case of Laura Badini, I think. Sarah, sorry, and she's in jail too for performing a volunteership and participating in, wow, okay. I don't even know. Okay, I need to continue.
Yeah, maybe you just continue. I'm not sure if this is the part of the film projection that was announced. Does anybody know? No. So you.
Yeah, all right, great. So the detention of crew members, that's also very much against any sort of human rights guarantees that we know of. The seizure of boats, that's been determined to be illegal in the case of Proactiva. We are now fighting the case of Violeta. In the case of Jugendrettet.
When you say we are fighting, means you are a legal representative.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we as the community of sympathizers, but then the Global Legal Action Network also is contributing. The closure of ports, that's something that has not yet been tested, but I think probably that would be a good candidate for strategic litigation. Orders to stand by, we won't speak about those anymore, but once upon a time, for example, in a couple of interventions by the Aquarius and Proactiva and several others, when rescue assets were approaching rescue theatres where the Libyan Coast Guard was near, they received orders to stand by and not intervene. And that delayed rescue response, risked lives unnecessarily, and in many instances led to drowning. That's illegal as well. It's an infringement of the right to life. And orders to hand over people to Libya, to the Libyan Coast Guard, I mean, that's been repeated during this summer, not so much in relation to search and rescue NGOs, which have been prevented from taking action, but also in the case of Sarost 5, that Kashef discussed earlier, but also in the case of Asso Otto. In all these cases, I mean, delivering orders to collaborate with a regime that is going to bring people to a place which cannot be qualified as a place of safety amounts to delivering orders to cooperate in an issue of fulfillment. So all of this, I think, are issues that can be attacked. But obviously, I mean, legal proceedings take time, and they cannot be but one piece in the puzzle of different actions that Giorgia has mentioned that should take place for an effective response by the search and rescue NGO community and others sympathizing with them to contest and challenge and create a counter-narrative and a counter-climate that makes search and rescue possible, and the response of the civil society towards those in need of safe passage are reality. I wanted to add one more thing, if I may. I think if the legal remedies are going to be part of the puzzle, it requires a change of mentality on the part of the search and rescue NGOs, which I know they are not very keen embracing, because they will need to position themselves as human rights defenders, and they will have to attract more of the limelight. I know that they are not keen in doing that. They prefer that the protagonism is taken by the rescuees, by the migrants themselves, because that's the actual tragedy, that's the actual need. They shouldn't exist, search and rescue NGOs, if we had a humane approach to migration flows via maritime routes and otherwise. You would not need search and rescue performed by civil society. So I understand that attracting attention and putting yourself on the line is not something that you might want. But if you did that, there are some advantages that could be pursued. And the report by Amnesty International points in this direction, the one that Francisca was presenting earlier today. There is a declaration on human rights defenders, which is already dating back to 1998. It was an unanimous declaration adopted by all the members of the UN General Assembly, including all the members of the European Union. And it was adopted by unanimity, consensus. No one thought that defending the defenders of human rights was something bad or contestable. And actually, Article 1 of that declaration is actually quite telling. It says that everyone, not just anyone who would self-characterize as a self-defender, but every human being, has the right, individually or in association with others, to promote and to strive for the protection and realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms at the national and international level. Everyone means everyone, and so I think everyone should feel concerned, including the search and rescue NGOs. Well, what is the advantage of positioning oneself as a human rights defender? Well, the declaration is not legally binding per se, but it doesn't add anything to what already exists in terms of legally binding obligations on the part of states. It draws together ICCPR, so all the conventions and covenants that we know about at the international and regional level defending human rights and fundamental freedoms of all, and puts it against this sort of backdrop and creates a framework that coherently presents the task of those engaged in defending human rights as something that is worthy of protection. And then it reminds each state, in Articles 2 and 3 of this declaration, that they have a duty to protect, promote, and implement the rights of everyone, including those of the human rights defenders. And that includes the creation of all conditions necessary to ensure those rights and freedoms in a proactive way, so that in practice they can be realized and become realizable. So each country shall adopt such legislative, administrative, and other steps, including funding, the provision of funding, to ensure that the rights and freedoms of human rights defenders and everybody else are guaranteed. And so if the right to perform rescue that Itamar and I are trying to develop in a paper is a thing, and we think it is, because it doesn't really create anything ex novo, it just pulls the dots together of things that already exist, the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of consciousness, the freedom to adopt political performative action, then positioning yourselves as human rights defenders could create a niche for further action and create probably synergies between yourselves, other NGOs, such as, I don't know, Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, and it would create a new positioning of what has been happening already. I think there is hope for this to happen. There is already a UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders that has contested the approach of developed countries that human rights defenders only exist in developing democracies. They have said in one of the latest reports that human rights defenders exist everywhere because human rights violations occur everywhere. So that's one thing. So that's another point of entry or lobbying strategy that one could envisage, engagement with the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. And legal action could accompany that move. There is one beamer of hope. On the 6th of July 2018, the French Conseil Constitutionnel, so the French Constitutional Court, delivered a very important decision that has gone under the radar, which uses the principle of fraternité, so solidarity, fraternity, as having constitutional value and legal content. And I'm quoting my own translation from the French. It says, acts of mutual aid undertaken for humanitarian purposes cannot be punished or repressed, irrespective of the status of the person being helped, even when that results in their irregular entry onto national soil, which is exactly what search and rescue NGOs are doing. With this, I conclude, and then I don't know if you have any follow-up questions, but like this, I make sure that I say everything I wanted to say, if I may. There was a question from the public: what is the distinction between rescue and smuggling? And this ties in with a comment by Giorgia that there is no law prohibiting rescue. There can't be any law prohibiting rescue. We have heard from Itamar that rescue is actually a duty of both coastal states and flag states all over the world. But there is more to this. There is a UN protocol that defines what migrant smuggling means, and it requires a bunch of different things. I'm just going to give you 4 points that Articles 3 and 4 of that protocol make clear. You need the procurement of illegal entry of somebody without a right of entry in exchange for a financial gain. And that financial gain cannot be the funding that organizations receive via donations from their civil bases. Financial gain as in you put a price for the facilitation of irregular entry, and that's a gain that didn't exist, and you acquire through the performance of the facilitation of irregular entry. Then that performance needs to be part of an organized criminal group and an organized criminal venture. If there is no component of that sort, then the crime of facilitation of smuggling or irregular entry is not perfected. It doesn't exist. There has to be transnationalism in the crime, and one could argue that rescuing somebody on the high seas and bringing them to Italy, for example, or Malta, would not meet this particular requirement, because people would not be technically being transferred from one country into another. That's disputable, but in any event, that's another element. The most important is that there has to be intention on the part of the perpetrator. There has to be mens rea, otherwise the crime is not constituted. So unless there is this willingness on the part of the NGOs to traffic people, to smuggle them, and to enrich themselves through the act, what they're doing cannot legally be characterized as a criminal action. And so that's, again, a way to contest the playing of the words in this mere campaign to which NGOs have been exposed throughout the past year and a half. So, in a nutshell, rescue and smuggling is not the same. There is a right to rescue, and if you position yourself as a human rights defender, probably you're going to be opening up a new field where the battle or the struggle can be continued. Thank you.
Quickly jump back to your notion of positioning the NGOs as human rights defenders in a legal sense. What would that technically mean? Could they go to a court and sue Joseph Muscat and say, we want our vote back because we have the legal right to defend the human rights on this hill?
That's precisely what I think will happen.
Where? How long would that take? And,
where? First in the Maltese courts, then to Strasbourg, probably. And how long will it take? A long time. But in the meantime, you can campaign, you can lobby, you can contact the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights of human rights defenders, and you can do a whole bunch of other things that could support the legal action and make clear that that issue is on the agenda, receives media attention, and maybe creates sympathies that for the time being have not been created in countries such as Italy, Malta, and to a certain extent also Spain.
There was a report a few weeks ago that after Salvini has not allowed a big group of migrants from the ship to enter Italian territory, I think for 6, 7, 8 days or so, that the prosecutor of Italy started an investigation against Salvini because of the Giorgia case. Many people said now is going to have a problem. Do you share that? Is he going to have a problem?
Hopefully. I mean, I wouldn't discard it. I mean, I think it's a very sound element, and it's an element that allows us to sort of embrace a bit of hope in relation to the democratic situation in Italy. There is a separation of power, that's great, and the prosecutors are doing their job regardless of who is committing the infringement and the human rights violation, and that's great. To be honest, I'm not sure of the outcome, but it would be great if, together with this, there would be further, unity in the civil society community, adding more pressure from the legal perspective and not just the political one, to put Salvini on the line and his supporters and all those who would criminalize human rights defenders.
Thank you, Giorgia. You wanted to add something?
Yeah, actually, just quickly on the investigation. I mean, let's for a moment think about the fact that our Ministry of Interior, Italian's Ministry of Interior, is investigated for sequestro di persona aggravato. How would you translate it? Avvocato, I mean, it's called, like kidnapping people, kidnapping people and doing it for the purpose of obtaining something. Okay, and yesterday the prosecutor that is investigating the Ministry of Interior has received a threat. So it has received a letter with some bullets, and inside the letter was written, "You're under fire. You're watched." So this is the status of things. And quickly to comment on the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, we are in touch indeed, and this is an avenue that we are pursuing. And through the Italian section, we got in touch directly. We met the UN Special Rapporteur for the human rights defenders, Michel first, and that was at the beginning of the summer, and together with other NGOs we have written a letter to the Special Rapporteur, and this will be the basis for a report that will be sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Italy. That's actually the regular procedure. And we're also in touch with the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights of Migrants. They actually, through a network of human rights defenders that we joined, we managed to reach out to these people, and they then contacted us directly to ask for information. So we're going to, for example, pass on the reports from forensic oceanography and put them in touch also with people from Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, so that they have all the information with regards of what has been happening, and all our rescue reports and so on and so forth. So, and we are also going to contact tomorrow Michelle Bachelet after the declaration, the statement she made a couple of days ago, because, well, she said it, so now we're gonna say that we're available for information, so be careful about whatever you say, because we may then chase you. And so we are moving in this direction, and at least what we see is that in a moment where everything seems to go down and there seems to be no hope, we actually see quite some reactions at different levels, and it's very interesting to see, especially at UN level, to see these people in these specific roles moving right towards us with respect to what's going on.
A few days ago, some alarm phone activists also had a moment of hope, saying that the internal conflict in Libya has re-escalated and the tensions were so strong that some said even the Libyan Coast Guard might be affected by this and might not be able to continue their work anymore. Maybe also maybe say something about that. Do you think that's a possibility to come back on the track and say, okay, the Libyan Coast Guard, too bad, it's not there anymore, so allow us to get there, to go there again?
Sure. Quickly, so the Libyan Coast Guard was always a very dodgy killing town, and I think with the escalation of hostilities, the advantage to contest the role is that because there is no stable government anymore, and before you could pretend that the government of national accord was a normal government with the power to enforce laws and run like a judicial system where if anything would go wrong with the Libyan Coast Guard, they would be taken to, disciplinary proceedings or whatever it was. Now, after the escalation of violence, we know that, it's flagrant that the government of national accord has zero power, de facto, and also de jure. And therefore, the Libyan Coast Guard has become completely unaccountable. Before you could pretend that there was somehow a line of command and control between the Libyan Coast Guard and the government, and that if anything would go wrong, you would have an interlocutor and something could be remedied. Now, there is not even the marriage of that. There is a lack of enforcement machinery, no court system, no minimum human rights guarantees. Part of the Libyan Coast Guard have been the object of UN sanctions for participation in human trafficking and involvement in slavery action and the selling of people. So I think the pretense that the Libyan Coast Guard can be a legitimate partner in the central Mediterranean is no longer sustainable. If it ever was, now it's finished, I think.
Yeah, just briefly about the Libyan Coast Guard, because actually they are warlords and they got benefit from this kind of conflict and war. And people who was fleeing from Libya in 2014 and met them in the west of Egypt. They were fleeing towards east to take a trip from Egypt to Europe, and they were actually the one who involved in the human rights violation and torture is what's called the Libyan Coast Guard. They rule not to enforce the law, they rule just to get benefits and take over after the legacy of Gaddafi. There is no government, there is no hierarchy, there is no state at all, it's all a lie, and everyone there knows the truth. Even Libyans themselves nowadays, not just African nationalities, even Libyans themselves nowadays trying to escape and flee because of the situation. Like they were just keeping patient because they have a different mentality somehow related to the roots and land, and they were just resistant for long 7 years in the hope that things will change, but things are changing to the worse. So I think there is no hope at all of cooperating, which was called the Libyan Coast Guard, which was just like a temporary drug from the Italian side to say, hey, there is Libyan Coast Guard in the SAR zone, we are not responsible anymore. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe we can leave the Libyan Coast Guard at this moment and open the debate for everyone now.
Can I add one thing on the Libyan? Yes. One thing, from a search and rescue perspective, already in the past, we have witnessed that when there are increasing clashes in Tripoli, the Libyan Coast Guard is not able to operate, and we had an uprising arrival, and this we have witnessed also last time in the early summer. And another element in the latest email. The latest communication we got from the Transport Authority in Malta with regards to the detention of our vessel, there is a clear reference to the situation in Libya. So it is said that without prejudice to the above, referring to the position on not leaving the vessel, letting the vessel leave the port of Malta, the Transport Malta says, be assured that the current situation, including the recent unfortunate developments in Libya, is nevertheless actively being followed with a view to assessing the possibilities for a solution. So even at governmental level, they know exactly that the political situation may result in an uprising of arrivals, and this letter was at the basis of the open letter that was sent to the Prime Minister, because it clearly showed how our detention is based solely on political reasons. Thanks.
Thank you. So now, questions, please. Sie können die Fragen auch gerne auf Deutsch stellen, wird übersetzt. Würden vielleicht zusammen und maybe collect 3-4 questions and then try to answer here in a row. The gentleman on the left.
Ja, ganz kurz. Finde jetzt am Ende ist es ja wichtig, erstmal vielen Dank an die Organisatoren, dass so eine Veranstaltung möglich ist, aber es wäre auch gut, wir haben noch einen Impuls, nennen wir mit. Es gibt ja 2 Ebenen in der Diskussion, direkt auf dem Meer zu helfen, Seenotrettung. Und der zweite ist, wir sind ein Parlament, wie wir zukünftig weitere Brandherde verhindern, zu helfen. Und ich denke genau, die Seenotretter haben nicht nur die Recht, sondern auch die Pflicht, über die Veränderung der Politik zu sprechen, Vorschläge zu machen, weil die progressive Flüchtlingspolitik ist diejenige, die Flucht überflüssig macht. Jetzt eine Anregung. Wir haben über Menschenrechte gesprochen. Wäre es nicht möglich, sich auch zu vereinbaren? Am Tag der Menschenrechte, wir kommen aus verschiedenen Ecken aus Italien, eine Aktion zu planen, die das Menschenrecht auf Leben dezentral in den Mittelpunkt rückt und um an die Strukturen auch der Politik anzugehen. Es steht da in dem Programm drin, die Fluchtursachen sind ja die Kriege, die Ökonomie, Klima, Menschenrechtsverletzungen. Und das würde ich als Frage, eine Anregung reingeben, dass wir auch mit einer Impuls hier herausgehen, nicht nur mit einer Proklamation, sondern auch die Seenotrettung von mir auf unsere Straßen tragen. Letztes Beispiel, wir hatten so einen Banner hier mal im Brandenburger Tor mit den Toten, 17.000 Menschen haben das auch von Militäreinrichtungen gebracht. Also ich würde gerne wünschen, noch ein paar Anregungen der Aktion, wie wir gemeinsam dezentral vielleicht auch verabreden können. Danke.
Dankeschön. Dann gab es hier vorne auf der rechten Seite eine Wortmeldung. Ja, der hat sich vorhin schon, die hat sich. Ja, bitte?
Ganz kurz, ich hatte vorhin angespielt auf den Unterschied der Aquarius und Unterschied der NGO-Schiffe. Ich kann mir vorstellen, dass Sportgeräte aus dem Sportbootregister, so ist es ja bei den sogenannten NGO-Schiffen, sind keine Berufsschiffe, anders geschützt sind oder weniger geschützt sind wie Schiffe, die Instrumente des Welthandels sind, wo man keine Rechtswillkür irgendwie einführt. Das ist zum Beispiel flaggenrechtlich zu sehen, wenn wir über 3 Völkerrechtssubjekte, ich sag mal, eigene Deutschland, Flaggen irgendwie Yachtsportregister Holland und dann Malta beim Internationalen Seegerichtshof in Hamburg Herausgabe von Eigentum eingeklagt werden soll, wo selbst das Eigentum unterschiedlich bewertet wird, nämlich einmal als unbewegliches Eigentum nach Schiffsregister oder als bewegliches Eigentum, ist national überall unterschiedlich. Habe ich keinen Erfolg beim Internationalen Seegerichtshof überhaupt eine Prozesslegitimation zu erlangen. Das ist der Seegerichtshof, der zuständig ist für die Herausgabe eines Schiffes. Nur mal so ganz kurz. Eine weitere Sache.
Wir sagten ja ganz kurz, ne?
Ja.
Bitte. Ja, bitte, aber ganz kurz, was jetzt noch kommt.
Ach so, ja, ganz einfach Flaggenrecht. Einfach dort mal reingucken, Flaggenrechtsgesetz. Ich glaube, der Hinweis ist die Frage, kam der von Deutschland? Flaggenrechtsgesetz, Paragraph 1, Paragraph 6, Paragraph 15, mal reingucken, wäre eine Frage, die die Abgeordneten des Deutschen Bundestags von die Linke bei Seehofer mal anfragen können.
Vielen Dank.
Ja.
Da oben.
Wissen Sie, wie weit der Bundestag im Prinzip Deutschland bei Seenotrettung irgendwo beteiligt ist? Also was ich noch so gesprochen hatte, der hat Beitrag gesehen, ich weiß nicht, was zivil ist. Das sind keine zivilen Kräfte, was ins Wasser gegangen ist, irgendwo Leute gerettet werden. Wie weit kann man das?
Entschuldigung, es gibt keine Übersetzung, wenn du nicht das Mikrofon benutzt. Oder sehr laut sprichst. Es gibt auch nur, du müsstest dahin gehen. Es gab keine Übersetzung jetzt, oder? Du bist noch nicht? Nee. Davon ist doch ein Mikrofon, oder? Okay. Also wenn es jetzt oben gar keins gibt, die Frage, ich übersetze es dann gleich. Also die Frage war sozusagen, wie weit ist die Bundeswehr in der Seenotrettung beteiligt? Ja? Okay, danke. Weitere Fragen?
Ja, Frank Dörner, auch Sea-Watch. Ich habe eine Frage bezüglich der Möglichkeit, wirklich auch aktiv zu werden. Es ist schön, dass sich jetzt natürlich die UN-Special Rapporteure, wie man das so schön nennt, mehr interessieren für das Sujet und die eigentliche Frage, die wir haben. Aber auf der anderen Seite ist natürlich auch eine Frage, die ich so ein bisschen provokativ stellen will, inwieweit nicht die UN-Organisationen, so wie sie zum Teil aufgestellt sind, auch Teil des Problems sind. Denn letztendlich legitimieren sie mit ihrem Sein, zum Beispiel auf der libyschen Seite, durch die IOM-Präsenz, aber auch mit dem UNHCR manchmal Situationen, in denen durch die Anlandung der Leute dann sozusagen oder damit eine Rechtfertigung für die Anlandung der Geflüchteten geschaffen werden kann. Und ähnliche Situationen hatten wir jetzt in Tunesien eben, wie es beschrieben wurde in dem einen Fall. Wie wird das gesehen und gibt es nicht die Möglichkeit, auch in diesem Bereich nochmal ein bisschen kritischer zu argumentieren, zu diskutieren und dort einen Druck zu machen, damit der dann wieder weitergegeben wird an die jeweiligen Geberländer?
Ja, so halb Frage, halb Kommentar. Also wir haben, glaube ich, viel gehört, was rechtlich möglich ist zu erkämpfen. Dennoch haben wir auch sehr, sehr viel gehört, was eigentlich den politischen Charakter der ganzen Repression und der Unmöglichmachung der Seenotrettung gezeigt hat. Ich selber war vor kurzem auf Lesbos mit einer neuen Menschenrechtsbeobachtungs-NGO Mare Liberum. Ich war da während der Zeit, als Sarah und übrigens auch noch 2 andere ins Gefängnis gebracht wurden und 20 weitere jetzt untersucht werden. Und wir haben unter anderem mit einer Rettungs-NGO zusammengearbeitet und haben sehr guten Kontakt, die wiederum mit der griechischen Küstenwache sehr guten Kontakt haben, zusammenarbeiten, deren Auflage zwischen 2 und manchmal 4 Stunden, dann doch wieder nur 2 Stunden am Tag sind, die sie ausfahren dürfen, um zu retten. Es gibt dafür keine rechtliche, keine technische, nur eine politische Erklärung, warum es eine Zeitbegrenzung gibt und warum die dann auch noch variabel ist. Das ist nur ein weiteres Beispiel, um zu zeigen, es ist eine politische Frage und ich begrüße natürlich diese Instrumente und vielleicht bin ich an der Stelle sogar Teil davon, richtig zu kämpfen, dennoch zeigt es doch eigentlich, und das ist die Frage, ist es nicht vielmehr ein politischer Kampf? So, wenn ich das jetzt gleich noch kommentieren darf, dann würde ich sagen, ja. Und ist es dann nicht auch so wahnsinnig wichtig und ist das nicht auch Teil dieser Debatte, die wir hier führen, die Seebrücke wirklich mit allem, was wir haben, zu unterstützen und sowas wie #unteilbar, eine Demonstration, die auch die Seenotrettung einschließt, aber Menschenrechte, Bürgerrechte allgemeiner auch einschließt und das als, man könnte sagen, Sammlungsbewegung von links auf die Straße bringt. Ist es nicht möglich, das mit allem, was wir haben, zu unterstützen, um einen politischen, einen gesellschaftlichen Wandel herbeizuführen, um wirklich gesellschaftliche Kräfteverhältnisse zu ändern, die dann wiederum einen juristischen Kampf auch den Sieg ermöglichen?
Eine Frage vielleicht noch, dann könnten wir zur Antwortrunde übergehen. Das ist nicht der Fall. Bitte.
Hallo, danke für deinen Beitrag. Ich bin tatsächlich von der Seebrücke Berlin. Ich glaube, wir können das so sagen, wir sind auf jeden Fall offen für so ein breites oder eine noch größere Bewegung. Die Veranstaltung hier heißt Seenotrettung im Mittelmeer, Wege aus der europäischen Abschottungspolitik. Ich frage mich, ob eine Europa-, oder seerechtliche Anwendung des Paragraphen 323c aus dem deutschen Strafgesetzbuch, der unterlassene Hilfeleistung und Behinderung von Hilfeleistung unter Strafe stellt, einer dieser Wege sein könnte. Ich bin selber kein Jurist, würde mich darüber natürlich freuen, wenn es ein Feedback gäbe oder sehr engagierte Juristen und Juristinnen, Politiker und Politikerinnen. Danke.
Hallo, genau, ich sehe das auch so, dass es ein politisches Problem ist, aber diese Politik, die geht ja tatsächlich teilweise über das, was rechtlich in Ordnung ist, hinaus und deswegen hätte ich noch gerne von unserer Superjuristin vorne gewusst, was sie denn noch für Schlupflöcher irgendwie. Ich meine, es gibt so viele Sachen, wo gerade in den Raum geworfen wird, dass es gegen das Völkerrecht ist, gegen das Seerecht, ob das jetzt ums Nothafenrecht geht oder weiß ich nicht, sonst verschiedene Sachen. Deswegen würde mich mal gerne noch interessieren, was es für Möglichkeiten für dieses Strategic Litigation geben könnte, die wir jetzt noch nicht besprochen haben.
Rechts daneben hat sich noch 2 Meter, also von mir aus gesehen rechts. Bitte.
Ganz kurzes Follow-up dazu, Asmus Michel, mein Name. Das wäre die Frage in die gleiche Richtung, weil wenn man angehen würde und sagen, okay, also See- und Rettungsorganisationen sollen jetzt Human Rights Litigator werden und vor Gerichten Prozesse anstreben, dann stellt sich natürlich die Frage, ob das schriftlich dadurch gebunden ist, oder ist es in aller Regel. Und wenn wir überlegen, dass solche Prozesse, bis sie dann vom EGMR entschieden sind, bis zu 10 Jahre dauern, dann stellt sich natürlich die Frage, ist das die Zukunft von See- und Rettung, die wir haben wollen, die man haben will? Und das wäre dann natürlich auch die Frage in die Richtung, weil das ja so angelegt wurde. Danke.
Vielen Dank. Karl Kopp, es gab 2 Fragen, die so ein bisschen auf Deutschland zielen, also jedenfalls nach der Bundeswehr. Inwieweit ist die Bundeswehr beteiligt in der See-und-Rettung oder nicht beteiligt als Teil von eurem Fonds mit?
Sie war beteiligt. Ich denke, es wurden Zahlen genannt, wie insgesamt die Seenotrettung von Frontex und dieser EU-Militärmission zurückgegangen sind. 2, ganz kurz, ich bin in meiner Organisation, ich arbeite jetzt seit 1992 im Asylbereich, Litigation, Klagen, der Einzelnen zum Recht zu verhelfen, ist essentiell. Das ist täglich Arbeit. Ja, von Lesbos bis nach Straßburg, ja, Klagen, ja, und so weiter, dass Leute Recht bekommen. Ob und Schiffskatastrophen, Pharmakonissi, dass sie irgendwann nach 5 Jahren die Angehörigen vielleicht ein bisschen Gerechtigkeit erfahren, ne, durch den Europäischen Gerichtshof für Menschenrechte. Und. Das ist wichtig. Das ist oft der letzte Planken, den wir haben, um Basisrechte zu verteidigen. Dennoch, wenn wir über Seenotrettung reden, müssen wir über Klagen reden, aber doch ein Gedanke, den hattest du jetzt auch oder vorher schon angesprochen. Wir hätten doch vor 25 Jahren nicht gesagt, wenn wir im Flüchtlingsbereich arbeiten, im Migrationsbereich, wir werden Seenotretter und Retterinnen, sondern es sind nicht so viele Menschen auf der Flucht gestorben. Und das ist ein neueres Phänomen und deshalb reden wir als den Einstieg, als Notwehr über die Seenotrettung. Und wir sagen alle immer noch im nächsten Satz legale und gefahrenfreie Wege nach Europa. Aber das muss man natürlich, dafür muss man kämpfen. Und die Kollegin von Watch the Med hat vorhin das Visa-Regime oder andere Geschichten angesprochen. Das ist natürlich so. Das ist die europäische Normalität, die so viele Toten produziert. Das müssen wir, denke ich, in solchen Bewegungen, die jetzt aufgezählt wurden, im Rahmen der Seebrücke, in den verschiedenen, in Deutschland sind wir noch relativ stark, müssen wir das thematisieren. Was mich besorgt ist, das wurde ja beantwortet, Italien war auch für uns ein Vorbild, wenn man älter ist, ein Vorbild. Bezogen auf Widerstand, auf zivilgesellschaftliches Engagement. Ich finde es zutiefst beunruhigend, dass es sehr ruhig in Italien geworden ist, weil das nicht nur eine Krise der Seenotrettung ist, sondern es gibt eine, wie soll man sagen, eine Faschisierung in Teilbereichen der Politik und über die muss man reden. Was findet da für eine Gleichschaltung statt? Und natürlich sind es wir und zivilgesellschaftlich oder Initiativen, Menschenrechtsbewegungen, die den Widerstand versuchen zu organisieren. Aber wenn nichts in dem Land passiert, Feierabend. Ne? Aber dann ist auch für uns Feierabend.
Dankeschön. Giorgia, we have 3 minutes left for your final answer. There were 3 questions that might be interesting to see. Which one was the UN organizations, IOM, UNHCR, to which extent are they part of the problem and how could you politically address that? Or in how far does it make sense to stress the litigation strategies instead of the political strategies? I think maybe one of those.
But we just got the info that we have to finish here at 9:15, so.
Yes, thanks. Well, with regards to the litigation strategy, actually, I think that Violeta is the most suitable to answer. And with regards to the role of UN agencies, Sea-Watch has indeed been quite critical with regards of the engagement, especially of UNHCR and IOM, and we regard with quite some concerns the proposal of a regional disembarkation mechanism that is in fact promoted by the UNHCR, and it involves North African countries that, as my colleague from Amnesty has very well explained, cannot be considered safe places. And I just wanted to make a very quick remark on the registration of the vessel, since the question came twice. And just to make it clear, we're not registered as a sport boat. At Sea-Watch, we are registered as a pleasure craft, and we are regularly registered in the Dutch National Registry. And we are definitely looking into flag law, but we're doing that in the Netherlands because that's our flag state, and we have an expert, a lawyer with this precise expertise working on it. And we have also considered filing a case at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, but as you know better than me, in order to do that, you need the consent of your flag state. So that's exactly, that's also the reason why we're holding on starting legal action in Malta, even if it really deserves so, for two reasons. One is for the point that you raised, that it's going to take very long time and it's not going to help to have our vessel back at sea, even if we're looking into alternative options, if that's going to be the case. And second, because we're looking into the support of our flag state to free a vessel that belongs to its authority and has nothing that actually can be contested to it legally.
Thank you, Giorgia. Thank you, Violeta. Thank you, Karl. Thank all of you for being here so long time. Thanks to the Linksfraktion for organizing all this. And now, at the end, André Hunko is going to take the word and for final remarks.
Ja, vielen Dank für das Wort jetzt. Ich soll hier noch zum Schluss ein paar abschließende Worte sagen, das mache ich sehr gern. Ich will vielleicht sagen, dass wir drei, Michael Brandt, Eva Maria Schreiber und ich, diese Konferenz bewusst ein bisschen so organisiert haben, dass vor allen Dingen die NGOs und die Hilfsorganisationen zu Wort kommen. Wir haben uns hier auch sehr zurückgehalten. Vielleicht ist es auch ein bisschen die politische Dimension auch etwas zu kurz gekommen, aber ich glaube, dass das sehr wichtig war und dass wir verstehen, dass sozusagen auch als Ermutigung für die Arbeit, dass das hier so im Bundestag stattfinden konnte. Ich würde trotzdem gerne noch 2, 3 politische Bemerkungen machen. Zum einen, wir tagen parallel zur Haushaltswoche. Hier gerade der Bundestag beschließt den Bundeshaushalt 2019. In diesem Bundeshaushalt ist der größte Anstieg an Militärausgaben in der Geschichte der Bundesrepublik festgelegt. 5,4 Milliarden Euro von 2018 auf 2019. Gleichzeitig, das wurde am Anfang schon erwähnt, werden sozusagen Entwicklungsausgaben und humanitäre Ausgaben niedrig gehalten und sollen sogar in den nächsten Jahren sinken. Ich will das sozusagen als Kontext hier darstellen, und wir haben einen ähnlichen Prozess auf der europäischen Ebene, auf der EU-Ebene. Auch dort wird der Haushalt diskutiert, der mittelfristige Finanzrahmen, mit massiver Aufstockung für Frontex, für die Abschottung, für eine Festung Europa auf der einen Seite und auf der anderen Seite eben auch ein neu eingerichteter Verteidigungsfonds zum ersten Mal in der Geschichte der Europäischen Union. Also wir erleben sozusagen eine Zeit der Militarisierung nach innen und außen. Und wir haben, und das wurde immer wieder angesprochen, eine Politik, die vor allen Dingen auch hier von der Bundesregierung vorangetrieben wird, eine Externalisierung der Flüchtlingsabwehr. Flüchtlingsabwehr wird immer weiter sozusagen von den eigenen Grenzen vorgelagert, in Libyen, aber sogar bis nach Zentralafrika hinein durch Abkommen. Und ich will einen Gedanken noch zu äußern, der sehr selten geäußert wird. Das ist inhuman, ja, aber es stärkt auch autoritäre Regime und perpetuiert damit Fluchtursachen. Und dafür ist die Türkei und der Türkei eigentlich das beste Beispiel. Es ist nicht nur inhuman und rechtswidrig teilweise, es ist eben auch eine Stärkung solcher Regime und das muss man auch, denke ich, sagen. Es ist sehr viel hier diskutiert worden über Recht. Ich bin auch kein Jurist. Ich weiß aber, dass Recht durchgesetzt werden muss. Dass der Kampf um das Recht ein politischer Kampf ist. Und das wichtigste Rechtssystem, was unser Thema hier berührt, ist die Europäische Menschenrechtskonvention. Also ein System des Europarates, wo ich Mitglied bin in der Parlamentarischen Versammlung. Und ich will nur darauf hinweisen, dass der Europäische Gerichtshof für Menschenrechte unter Druck ist. Das ist ganz jung, das ist ein weltweit einmaliges System eines Individualklagerechts von 47 Staaten, der unter Druck ist und dessen Überleben überhaupt gar nicht gesichert ist. Ich will nur mal darauf hinweisen, das ist eine politische Auseinandersetzung, die wir sozusagen in Zukunft führen müssen. Es gibt die Absetzbewegung von Großbritannien, es gibt die Auseinandersetzung dort mit Russland im Europarat und es gibt vor allen Dingen, das will ich jetzt nochmal sehr deutlich sagen, es gibt den unglaublichen Skandal, dass die Europäische Union, obwohl sie das in den Grundlagenverträgen drin hat, nicht der Menschenrechtskonvention beitritt. Ja, die Europäische Union ist sozusagen eigentlich verpflichtet, der Menschenrechtskonvention beizutreten und sich damit diesem Rechtssystem auch anzuschließen. Das bedeutet konkret, Menschenrechtsverletzungen von Frontex können nicht beklagt werden. Aber das Besondere für uns ist sozusagen bei der Menschenrechtskonvention, dass jeder Mensch in diesem Raum von 850 Millionen Menschen, vom Mittelmeer bis zum Nordpol und Lissabon bis Vladivostok, hat ein Individualklagerecht. Und das war das Besondere an Hirsi. Somalia, Eritrea, die haben geklagt, sie haben Recht bekommen, das war wegweisend. Das ist ein System, das wir verteidigen sollten, auch in den europapolitischen Debatten, die wir nächstes Jahr auch haben werden. Ich will ganz viel, mir drängt ganz viel, ich will nur darauf verweisen, wir haben hier einen Gipfel in Salzburg, das ist ein informeller Gipfel, da werden migrationspolitische Sachen festgeklopft, da wird nicht beschlossen, aber da wird eine Richtung vorgegeben. Die EU-Kommission hat massive Verschärfungen angekündigt und es gibt Proteste. Es gibt ein großes Bündnis in Österreich, es gibt einen Gegengipfel, es gibt Gegendemonstrationen, auch darauf sollte man orientieren. Wir orientieren natürlich auf die Seebrückendemo. Ich komme aus Aachen, ich war völlig beeindruckt in dieser kleinen und nicht besonders riesigen Stadt. Binnen weniger Tage 1500 Menschen auf die Straße gegangen sind. Da rufen wir zu auf. Ich will zum Abschluss, ich will einen Gedanken noch sagen. Ich möchte, dass die Kriminalisierung von Seenotrecht von späteren Historikern mit der gleichen Befremdung betrachtet wird wie die Irrfahrt der St. Louis 1939, wo 939 jüdische Menschen durch die ganze Welt gefahren sind und irgendwo aufgenommen wird. Das ist der gleiche Irrsinn. Und ich möchte, dass das irgendwann mal auch als Irrsinn der Geschichte in die Geschichte Das haben unsere Mitarbeiter organisiert. Ich will mich deshalb besonders bedanken bei Björn Schering, bei Gabriele Schanz, bei Marie-Sophie Keller, bei Manuel Faber, bei Matthias Monroy und bei der Sea-Watch und Jugendrettet-Vertreterin Kira Fischer und Sophie Schall. Vielen Dank. Zur Vernetzung, weil diese Konferenz soll eben auch den Gedanken der Vernetzung tragen. Vielen Dank.